Welcome to Foundation. If you'd like to get this episode early, sign up at the URL below. But now let's talk to Brian Wong, CEO and founder of Kiip. He's only 19 years old. So let's start off at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
Vancouver, Canada.
Vancouver?
Yes.
All right, so you went to school out there?
Yes.
High school, college?
Everything. Elementary school, high school, and college.
So were you into computers when you were younger, or?
Yeah, so my dad was the first to bring home this clunky, thing, and he was like, I don't really know what you could do with this, but I think you probably want to hang out and play with this when you're younger. And so,
at what age was this?
This was I think I got my first computer when I was probably 7 or 8, and then I remember playing this game that had something to do with frogs, and I ended up being really, really addicted to it. And most of the time I was just playing games. And then he got a laptop for himself for work, and then he got us a laptop. So we were always ahead of the curve in terms of just having a lot of gadgets.
So you were into technology, you love gadgets,
Yes.
You love computers. So you went to high school, still into computers. Were you considered a geek back then?
Yes, I mean I can't deny that part. Yeah, I mean, well, I was Asian. I had these really round glasses. I had my mushroom cut when I was in elementary school, and
so you're a nerd.
Yeah,
that's okay. I was too. If you go back and look at my high school
I'm
photos,
not ashamed.
It's pretty.
I'm not ashamed. No, I loved it because it was I had the excuse of needing to be at my computer all the time.
Yeah.
And my parents at some point actually thought I was addicted to computers for a little while.
Mine did too. Mine wanted to take away my keyboard when I was younger. My mom was like, I'm gonna disconnect your keyboard. You need to go outside and play.
My mom locked down my computer and hid it. So she took my laptop and threw it somewhere and hid it for a little while.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really funny.
So you started coding, or was it just you were into computers in general? Did you actually write code?
It started with Photoshop 7.
Okay, so design stuff.
Yeah, so I was at a forum called, I kind of stumbled, a friend trying to kind of turn me on to downloading it or pirating it in the first place, and started to design things. And I think I was designing, I don't know, way back, do you remember with BBSs, you would have SIGs or these signatures, and
signature files and whatnot.
And you could put an image there with something that was cool and maybe was a graphic, and I would design it for myself, and then a bunch of other people were like, oh, I want some too, and then I started designing it for them for $10 a pop.
Forum signatures.
Forum signatures, exactly. And then I started designing that with Photoshop, and that's how I learned how to design, was to design these SIGs. And I just started to learn through tutorials and use that whole process to learn about design. So design was my earlier sort of foundation.
That was kind of your first little business then, was actually selling these little signature files.
That was the first way that I got money through PayPal, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can make money off of digital things.
That's amazing that PayPal was around when you first started.
Yeah, PayPal was around.
Really old.
Yeah, sorry.
That's crazy. So, okay, you got into that. At that point, were you thinking okay, this is for me. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do my own business someday. Did you want to work for somebody bigger? Had you not decided at that point?
I was still super young. I think most of it was, I realized at some point though that you could make a lot out of just being connected and with hundreds of thousands of other people, and to be able to build cool stuff. But I didn't really think at the time, and I didn't even know what Silicon Valley was either, and stuff like that. I didn't even know that these things were happening around me, because I think that time was sort of the first boom. And I didn't know that these things were happening.
Right.
I just knew that there was an Alta Vista that I could search at, and a Lycos and a Hotbot, and all these really retro things. But I didn't really realize that I could do that. But then part of it was just growing in my own kind of communities. There were a lot of forums that I would hang out a lot, and I would learn from great designers there. And there's a funny part that not a lot of people know about, which is I was a huge Counter-Strike Source player, huge. I would spend 8 hours a day playing it. That actually helped me with design, probably the most than any other thing.
How so?
Because CS Source allows you to be incredibly accurate with your mouse, essentially. Eye-hand coordination, because with FPSs, using keyboard and mouse, you have to, basically within a split second, move your thing and op someone in the face.
Yeah, I can take you down, by the way.
We'll do it. We'll do it. But it was like I used that to just exercise my eye-hand coordination, and to the point where the accuracy with the mouse and keyboard was so intense that when I design, when you know where you need to put your mouse, you can go there almost instantly, and that I think is what was the most valuable for me when I was designing, for speed and efficiency.
So tell me about, you finished high school there in Canada. You went to college out in Canada as well?
Yeah.
So you finished high school early.
Yes.
How many grades did you jump?
So I skipped my first grade. It was grade 2, and then I skipped grade 7, and then 9, and then 11. So it was 4 in total. And then the funny thing was, the story is very short, but it's sort of 1 to 3 was because my teacher thought that I was teaching my fellow students more than I was learning, and so she was like, you should just go to grade 3. And part of it was an IQ test, so that was what was that. And then from 6 to 8, I was in this accelerated class already in grade 6 that was sort of this mishmash of grades 5 to 7. Their concept was to bring in a lot of different grades into one grade and have sort of people from below you learn from you and you learn from every sort of like just cross horizontal thing. And they basically one day were like, who wants to go to grade 8 next year instead of grade 7? And I was like, I do. And then part of it was an IQ test as well. Part of that program in high school was to help you get early entrance in university is what they called it. It was called the transition program. And so I got in after a lot of testing as well.
At what age did you get into university?
It was 14.
14.
Yeah.
And so 4 years there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You graduate, still up in Canada at the time. You're still in Toronto, or where are you at?
Vancouver.
Okay. And then decide to come to the States.
Yes.
Why'd you want to come to the States?
For Digg.
For Digg?
It was for
I
Digg.
had no idea that was the case, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was just for Digg.
No,
so.
dude. It's so what happened was I graduated in May of 2009, and the economy was really, really bad. I decided to go off and create this Twitter tool that you may be familiar with, Follow Formation.
Yeah, you copied my shit.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, give me the background on that. The first time I met this guy, like, Jeff told me, who's I created something called WeFollow.com, and Jeff was the designer on it, and he comes to me and he's like, man, this guy just ripped us off. He created something really similar, blah, blah, and I don't remember looking at it. I remember little bits of it, and then all of a sudden, he's working at Digg, like, a few days later. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how did this guy get in here? So what was tell me, I'm curious to hear this story, because I've never asked you about this.
This is good. So I got to tell you about it. So I first met you in London, right? Like it was in FOA.
Yes.
Way back in like 2009, and that was when I talked to Jeff about it.
Right.
So here's what happened was, in May I had a buddy of mine, Lucas, at university, and we were thinking about the API, the Twitter API. We're like, we should create something cool with this because it's just an open stream of data. We realized though that it was very tough to find information about who those people were automatically. So like tags, essentially, just categories. But what you guys did really, really well was people were able to categorize themselves, like put themselves under certain tags.
Yes.
And it wasn't just you, but there was a bunch of other services that had lists as well, like a
non those lists were just
really bad.
They're horrible. That's why we wanted to do
exactly.
Self-tagging.
So there's a whole series of these sites, and so we ended up aggregating a bunch of those tags and then assigning them to certain usernames. So we had probably about 150 super influential Twitter names that we were able to get off of like your service and a whole bunch of other services.
Right, but you were just crawling the shit.
We were
scraping the hell out of this.
it.
So and we didn't have an API.
We did, yeah, because we didn't have an API, so we're like, all right, we'll just scrape it. And decided to make a quick version. So it was like, rather than needing to go into every category and then go, oh, I like this person, follow. My whole thing was, I was like, well, people actually, when they first start off on Twitter, they want to just get it over with. They just want to fill their following list with people that they might want to be interested in, and then have like 200 people that they're following already, and then just get information from them right off the bat, right? So rather than using like the really broken suggested user list. So that was actually the main reason why we created it, is because the suggested user list at the time was just this iframe with like 50 people pre-selected. So anyways, we created that. So then I met you at FOA. My first time in the U.S. was actually, or not in the U.S., but in like the major city centers, so New York and San Francisco. I went to New York first in September, and I was there because I wanted to meet some tech people, and I was also there for vacation.
So you're 18 years old at this point, 17?
Still 18, yeah.
18,
yeah.
and you're just like, screw it, I'm gonna book some tickets.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make this happen.
Yeah, so that was like me freaking out, and I was like, I'm just gonna go.
So you had some money saved up from college?
From the business.
Odd jobs?
So one of the things that I did in university was I started this company called Air Marketing. And it was a web design company, and we were using the distributed model. So we would have contractors around the world that you were able to get work from, and then obviously you'd be able to put it together and then sell it as a package.
So you're making a little bit of cash off that.
We were. So, and then we actually created what I call an ideas fund. We saved up it was like 15 grand was in like this account, and all I knew was that I told the team, I was like, at some point we're gonna wanna create our own stuff, and we're not gonna be bringing in contractor dollars. We were obviously mimicking the 37 signals model, which everybody at the time that was admiring that was doing. And we had that in that bank account. And then the time came, and I was like, guys, I think we should stop doing stuff for other people, and we should start doing stuff on our own. And
so why'd you go to New York, though? Why leave? I mean, you could have easily done that there, right? Internet, you can do things online now.
Yes. It was because it was just a bigger city. It was just, Vancouver is really small.
Kind of limited you a little bit.
It was like, everybody was very comfortable. And I remember knowing but when you hear about New York City, it's like, it's
hustle and bustle,
the craziest.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I wanted to see what it was all about, just with my own eyes. And so I booked tickets to both New York and San Francisco because I was like, those cities, I haven't been there before. I just want to go and see it.
Yeah, when you go there, you're 18 years old, you land in New York, you don't know anybody there, right? You didn't know anybody?
No, not a single person.
Booked a hotel.
Yes.
You got on subways, you walked around the town. Did you go see any tech startups? Like what?
So here's what I did is, I had this idea, I was like, well, everybody should be reachable technically by email. They seem like they have, they have web presences. And folks like Fred Wilson and then David from Tumblr.
You didn't meet with Fred Wilson.
And I did actually.
How the hell did you pull that off?
So here's what happened.
That's like the most influential VC in New York.
So
one of the top 5 for sure.
Fred doesn't know this. Fred, because I haven't talked to him since, but Fred kicked off a series of events that I couldn't have even imagined. So what happened was, you know me, I like to just email people and get in and just talk to people, because I know that just being able to sit down with someone and talk to them is the most important way that you can even get to meet them and get to work with them. And so I just cold emailed him. I cold emailed probably 30 people.
Did you guess his email address?
Yes, I guessed everybody's email address.
How did you guess it?
So I have a tactic I use for email guessing. It's like you put your best guess in the to field, and then you put every other potential combination in the BCC field.
See, I just delete those emails. Because then you know it's spam.
But you don't see the BCC, right? Because it's hidden. The BCC field is totally hidden when you receive it. So all you see is the to field. So
I
you
thought
don't.
You set the CC field.
No, BCC field. So that's how I did it. So I put it all in the BCC field, and so you'll know on your end if you get this delivery status notification.
The only time I'm going to get tipped off is if I have multiple email addresses that forward to my account.
Exactly.
Right.
But so most of the time, usually one combo works. And I use that so the first 2 meetings I had was Fred Wilson, and the second was...
How did you get a meeting with him, though?
So he emailed me back, What
did you say in your initial email?
I said things like, I was really young, just graduated. I'd love to come and just meet you. And I know you don't have a lot of time, but I'd like to just steal 15 minutes of your time. I just want to sit down, 15 minutes, that's it. And he emailed me back and he was like, let's do it, 15 minutes on the calendar. And then he got his assistant, he put it together, and I showed up and it was 15 minutes. And we spent 15 minutes talking about actually things like his family, like just not even related to tech. It was just like so I could just get to know him and talk to him in the 15-minute period that we had.
You should have cut out all that crap. Don't talk about family. Just go straight to what you want to get.
But here's the thing too. He even challenged me. He was like, "Well, do you want funding? Do you want these things?" But it's like, I realized after I ended up doing that without asking him directly what I wanted, I think I was able to get more value. I think when you go up to someone, like you probably get turned off immediately when someone comes up to you and goes, Kevin, I have this idea, I'm gonna pitch it to you. Do you wanna invest? Do you wanna be an advisor? It's sort of like, it turns people off when you want something right away.
Not if they have something to show.
That's
because
true.
There's so many people that come up and say like, oh, I got this crazy idea, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, where is it? And they're like, oh, it's in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm like, build it. Like,
Yeah.
show me, like,
Yeah.
hand me an iPhone and be like, this is the app.
That's true.
That's cool, you know?
So at the time, I didn't have anything
Right,
to
right.
show as
Okay,
well. I
fair
mean,
enough.
I had follow formation maybe, but that wasn't like the highlight of it. But what happened was I ended up emailing other people, and I was like, you know, I'm in New York to meet with folks like Fred, and then there's like John Maloney from Tumblr.
Amazing. So once you got that meeting, you name dropped his name
Yes.
to get you into other meetings.
Yes. So
This is interesting tactics. I'm curious about this because you've been able to pull off some. Well, we'll get to it in a little bit about your funding and things like that. And I'm curious, like, you know, when I was going after funding my first time, being in my early 20s, and I was older than you are now, it was still difficult. You know, they have no idea who you are. And especially the younger you get, the harder it is, it seems.
Yeah.
So anyway, keep going. So you got a few extra meetings.
So I ended up just meeting up with more and more and more people, and the entire week ended up getting packed up. And these were people that I just wanted to meet. One of the other folks I met up with was Alex Bloom from Kiip that recently got acquired. Alex ended up introducing me to a few of his friends, and it just started. That's when it started to just do that. And then I realized the power at that time of networking. That was the first moment where I was like, this is happening.
So how'd you get into Digg?
So what happened was I went to London after I went to San Francisco first. So I was in San Francisco and I did the same tactic. So I emailed a bunch of companies and Digg was one of them. And
Who did you get a hold of at Digg?
I got a hold of Bob. Bob was the first guy. I emailed Bob and Mike.
Okay, two BD guys.
And they were both VP at the time, and then Mike was like a chief strategy officer, right? So I was like, I'll just guess the email addresses and email. And then Bob was like, I don't have the time to meet with you right now because I'm traveling or something. He's like, well, why don't you meet with this guy called Matt Van Horn? I think you'll really like him. And Van Horn ended up emailing me back, and he's like, you know, we should grab breakfast. And so what happened was we grabbed breakfast. I wasn't even looking to work at Digg at the time. Like, it was just, I wanted to see, it was really the only thing that I was trying to do with that trip was to see the valley with my own eyes. I just wanted to see why everybody was so crazily excited about it. There has to be a reason, is what I was thinking. I just wanted to see it. And so I came down.
It's kind of hard on first trip.
It was nuts.
You don't normally see the whole back end networking events things on a short little trip.
You don't. But here's the other thing. I packed so much in and I was totally just oblivious to things like, well, Palo Alto is the valley in the valley area, and then San Francisco is San Francisco. So yeah, I ended up meeting up with Van Horn, and then Van Horn actually took me back to the office and had me shake hands with Jay. And he told Jay, you should hire this guy. And within 2 weeks, I had to come back for an interview. And then after that, the offer, and then the visa, and then I showed up, and you're like, what is this guy doing here?
I had no idea.
But dude, like seriously, things happen. Like, I remember, yes, I got a meeting with Mike.
I'm like, here's a kid that stole my freaking, like, scraped my site. He's working at Digg.
I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
So Mike Maples, by the way, I ended up getting a meeting up with as well.
How did you get a meeting with him? So Mike is, for the people that are
strategy.
watching, Mike is a big angel / VC investor.
So same tactic, and people don't know this either. He doesn't even know this. I haven't told him this, but he obviously was in Menlo Park, and I asked him, same thing, 15 minutes, 30 minutes.
Right.
And he ended up looping in Ann as well, who's his partner over at Floodgate.
Yeah.
And those two also kicked off a big part of what I wanted to do and what I saw myself doing in the Valley. So they don't know this, but I ended up spending $150 on a cab ride down to Menlo Park.
Wow.
So I missed the Caltrain. There was a Caltrain that was supposed to leave, and I missed it. And my meeting was like in half an hour, and I was like, I guess I gotta do it. And I spent $150. I went down there. That meeting was when everything started. So when I talked to Ann and Mike, they started talking about thunder lizards, like, you know, this concept of people who want to just blow up things and like change the world.
Right.
And they said, you know, follow formation is great. What you're doing is whatever is cool. You're building stuff, but that's not going to change the world. Like, you gotta, we only invest in thunder lizards.
Right.
And that was like, click, and I was like, I gotta Like I know this will come, but this was enough for me to see that this is the mentality here. That people don't come here to build like a tool. They come here to build revolutions. And I just that was it. And so the stuff like that. So that entire time was just
That's a great way to put it, actually. I know a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs that go after kind of the low-hanging fruit of ideas. They'll see something out there, these Twitter little examples. Like I knew that WeFollow, when I originally built it, was just going to be a fun directory. I had no intention of that being a huge business, right?
Yeah.
But some people will build little ideas like that and think like, oh, this is going to be a huge business, and it's really just a little thing here, a little tweak there. It's nothing new and big.
And that was the filling holes comment. Remember way back? I think it was one of the I think it was who was it? Someone just said filling holes is not creating businesses.
Right.
And so that was what tweaked that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's
that was the entire thing.
Is that reference to like pavement kind of thing? Like you're actually laying pavement or you're filling holes?
Yeah. But it's like you shouldn't be filling holes when you want to create a business that's a multi-billion-dollar business, right?
Right.
Like, and then I thought about it. I was like, if someone's going to invest millions of dollars into a business, they don't want it just to be like it's going to help people in a utility.
They're not going to invest in that.
Well, they're not going. It has to be something that will change fundamentally how people act or behave or do something online.
Right.
And that was big. That's basically it.
So how did you come up? Let's fast forward. Then you decided, okay, I'm going to start something my own. I'm going to do this. The Digg had a bunch of layoffs. You were one of them. So kind of the forcing function to get you to go do something.
Yeah.
You then said, okay, screw it, I'm going to do my own business.
Yeah.
And
that's it. Yeah. It was it was May. It was just a year ago now.
Mm-hmm. At what point, so you're like sitting there, you're like, okay, I'm just laid off. I might lose my visa. I might have to go back to Canada. Crap. Okay, how do you go from there to actually sitting in front of VCs, pitching them something, and raising money?
Serendipity, in one word, and serendipity in a very unique path in that so it was right before Mother's Day. I freaked out. I went back home without my parents knowing. And I remember
So your visa was canceled, or you still had it?
No, I still had it, but it was just me.
Oh, because that's right. You pinged Digg, and they said they'd keep it alive for another week.
Yeah. I had a little bit of time, like grace period. But what happened was, and again, also people didn't really know this, but at the time I needed to go home. It was the cheapest ticket I could find. It was on Delta. It was from San Francisco to Minneapolis to Vancouver. And I remember being in Minneapolis at the airport, and my mom had called me, and she was like, hey, how are things? How are you doing? And obviously in the background, they're like, boarding, like gate C, blah, blah. And she's like, what's that? I'm like, oh no, it's like a really busy day at Digg. It's great. And I couldn't bring myself to tell them until I got there in person. It was actually, and it's like in the middle, it's like straight out of a movie or something, but like I arrived, it was raining, it was like 2 a.m. I took a cab home, knocked on the door, and my dad was like, who would be here at this time? And I didn't even know that I was coming back. And I told them, and my mom said that it was like the worst Mother's Day present that she'd ever gotten.
Oh, it sucks.
And that was the kickoff there. And then what I ended up doing in the months following was I started to travel a bit. I usually like to travel to get my mind off of things. I got the travel bug when I first went to Singapore for exchange. Like my last year of school, I lived in Singapore for 7 months for exchange. And then I ended up traveling back to Southeast Asia, also from the Ideas Fund, by the way. The Ideas Fund still had some money in it, so I was like, I need to get my mind off of everything. And the umbilical cord was kind of cut, if you think about it, because part of it was I came down with the opportunity. I wanted to build my career, build my reputation, and all of a sudden, I'd moved down and I'd everything. And all of a sudden, it's like, where am I going to go next? And part of the traveling was where I came up with the idea for Kiip. I was on a long haul flight straight to Singapore. It was connecting in Hong Kong to Singapore, and I ended up looking at a lot of people on these touch screen devices and thinking, why is everybody playing a game? And what happens that gaming became so quickly permeating through casual interaction with devices? And so for me, it was like, that was when it tipped that I was like, I got to start brainstorming things about, there's something here. And the epiphany took 30 days. It was like a full month of thinking. I was mapping out, what certain game mechanics look like, what certain things you would do in a game to feel happy. So I knew that just this notion of leveling up, all the different types of leveling up, I started mapping that all out. And I started just to look at it. I sat there and I looked at that page for probably a full week of me just figuring out what did this mean. And then I realized, and it came to me, I was like, we need to create a structure that other games can build on top of. So the idea started off like a open feint, where you have achievements that can be recorded and make leaderboards easier. And then I started doing research and I realized that open feint had already done this. And so then it came to me, why don't we just make it super, super, super simple? Why don't we just look at the achievement and look at how we can augment that achievement? I was like, well, real rewards, right? Real tangible things, because the virtual reward element was already covered by so many companies. I was like, why hasn't real rewards happened yet? And then the model quickly became, I was like, well, if I'm gonna be giving out real rewards, can't brands do that too? And can't that be a business where it's an advertising type of a model? And then that's where it started snowballing. So how that ended up with me, sitting in front of VCs and started talking about the idea was also, again, serendipity. I came down again, started to meet up with people again, started to kick off the networking thing again.
But you had an idea in hand this time.
I did, and I had mock-ups, and I had created stuff, and I had, at the time also...
Slide, like a little 5-point PowerPoint
Yeah, like PowerPoint,
kind of
and since I knew how to design and code really, really crappy HTML, I created a working version, which was really just a screenshot and then an email field, and then you could submit your email, and then you'd get a reward email kind of thing. So I already had that built out, and so I took that, and just the serendipity led to a guy by the name of Sam Pertil. He was one of the first engineers at Unoodle, and I had known Sam since maybe, when was this? I had met him when I was at Digg as well. And he was like, hey, let's catch up. One day we grabbed coffee, and he's like, hey, I know this guy called Adam at True Ventures. And he's interested in these, mobile ideas. And maybe you should meet up with him. I'll do an intro. I was like, all right, sure, cool. And I know how these things work. Intros, usually whatever, you never know what happens. I meet up with Adam for the first time at Crossroads, which is one of the cafes out in South Beach. And it was like a half-an-hour coffee, and all I was doing was just getting to know him, and I showed him the idea, and then he's like, oh, cool, okay, whatever, yeah, let's catch up sometime later. 2 days later, I get an email from him, and he's like, do you want to come in on Monday for a partners meeting? I'm like, what's a partners meeting? I don't know what a partners meeting is. And I started asking.
Did you say that back to him?
No, not to him. I started asking people,
friends.
their friends. I was like, dude, what's a partners meeting, right?
So for people that don't know at home, that's the meeting that you go and you have, and you meet with all the partners of the firm, and then that's when you pitch, and if they say yes, you actually get money.
It's when the decision gets made. And so I didn't know that it was that important. So I come into the partners meeting 5 minutes late, and I have this deck that I have. And I start showing it. I started showing the demo, and I, it was a normal meeting. I got to meet Phil and Puneet for the first time, and Adam was there. And 3 days later, I get a call, and they're like, "Well, we'd like to offer you this for this." And I was like, "Is this real? Are you actually wanting to invest in something that I just didn't realize was a formal entity just yet?" And that was the beginning of everything.
Cool.
So that's how it started.
Awesome. So you get that funding, that's done. Now you start hiring employees. People, again, is all networking based, people you had met, things like that?
Yeah, so you know Courtney, and Courtney was one of the lead engineers over when I was at Digg as well, and Courtney had left a month before I got laid off to start Follow Style with Amadeus. Yeah, so he had left, and I knew Courtney because he was one of the guys that interviewed me, actually. So during our interview process, Courtney and Dov interviewed me as part of the tech thing. So like, does he actually know anything about tech? Their mandate was to figure out if I actually knew anything about like the web and just like my technical knowledge. And I gave Courtney a call. Courtney was actually one of the first people that I called after I got laid off. I don't know why. I just needed because he's a really nice guy, and we became friends. And I wanted to sort of I wanted to tell him, first of all, I'm not at Digg anymore, and let's grab lunch or whatever. And he knew about the idea actually almost right after I'd gotten it. I came back from my travels, and he ended up meeting up with me many times while he was still with Amadeus doing Follow Style. And I didn't really think that of anything. I was just like, these guys have their own startup, whatever.
Right.
And so I ended up meeting up with him again after the funding started to come in. And he at the time had already helped me a bit with the demo. So part of the iPhone version of it, so actually running on the phone, he made it happen because I knew that he had like iPhone expertise, and so he built some of that for me. And just because he was just a nice friend, and he was really curious and he wanted to help. So this is where what the word inception came in, and I kind of knew how to identify this afterwards. I think that's what actually happened. I kind of used the word jokingly, but what happened was I talked to Courtney like a month ago about the idea, like a month before the funding. And almost around that time frame, he called me on his own. He's like, dude, let's grab lunch. I was like, what's going on? Of course, let's go grab. And we went to Sunflower in the Mission. It was this crazy, awesome Vietnamese restaurant. And it was Amadeus there, him, and then me. He's like, we want to do this with you. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, we want to create Kiip. We want to join. We want to do this. We want to. I was like, what? Aren't you doing Follow Style, blah, blah? And they're like, no, because we actually had this vision already, but from the other way. So Kiip is the vision of Kiip is to go from the layer to mini games, right? So to enable mini games to have these rewards right off the bat, rather than be its own app, right? Like I don't believe in a nucleic model for a rewards-based system. I would rather have a distributed model. But Courtney and Amadeus had already come up with this idea for their game. They had created this game called Schemo.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, what if people could get real rewards for playing Schemo? So they already had this idea almost in a parallel, but from a different direction.
That's awesome. That's the right kind of partner then. You have someone that's super energized about your idea.
Yeah, so it was their idea too, and it was my idea, and then we ended up hanging out, and they're like, dude, we gotta do this. Like, this is something that we're super, super stoked about.
Awesome.
And then so one thing led to another, and then we ended up starting as a team, sitting down at True's offices September 6th.
And then that turned into building a product and now going out and pitching some of these advertising agencies by yourself.
Yes.
One question I have, we got to wrap it up because I think we're going a little bit late, but one question I have is how you go about doing a lot of this stuff for the first time. Because, like, for example, we had a conversation just a few minutes ago, I don't know if you mind me saying, but you're going into your first board meeting here for the first time in a couple days from now.
Yes.
You've never done this before.
No.
You'd never pitched, Pop Chips or any of these other companies that you have on board now. Where do you get the courage and the strength and like what is it that you think like, okay, I just can't, I can't break down here. I got to just act like I've done this before. Like a lot of first-time entrepreneurs that I meet, they don't know how to go for it. I'd say a lot of the companies that I meet that I won't fund like as potential angel investments are because the entrepreneur doesn't have that just like, I'm going to make this work. Where do you find that strength and how do you go about doing that?
So I had to look back on the events in the last year to figure out why these things happened. But if you kind of think about it, it was because most of the time I was forced into it. Like it was out of no choice. It's like,
are you freaking out inside? Like when you went,
yeah, of course I am.
And pitched that partner.
Well, yeah, I go in there. I'm like, well, these guys are managing multi-$100-million funds, and I'm some random kid.
Right.
And what do they want from me? Right. Of course.
So are you seriously like pacing around before you go in? Like,
well, it's freaking out of my head. But part of it is I feel here's the only comfort that I have though. There's several comforts, but the main one I can only describe it this way, and maybe you can relate is. Do you know the phenomena of the poker player that has no fucking idea what he's doing? Right. So when you're in a poker game and there's veteran poker players that are like, I calculate every probability, I know exactly what to put down, and then some guy comes in and says, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm just gonna whatever, and he ruins the entire game. Right. Everybody just goes, I can't read this guy because he doesn't know what he's doing. Right. But sometimes, just sometimes, in the off chance, the guy who has no idea what he's doing wins. Right. So I feel comfortable knowing that there's always a first time, and when you're in the valley, it's almost like every single person that succeeded immensely just broke rules by not knowing what they were doing.
Right.
By reinventing a wheel that may have been incredibly broken already, but them trying to create new processes out of nothing. So for me, it's like part of all the things that I do, my philosophy is just learning a little bit more right before, right? So just so I have the knowledge advantage and I'm not like completely clueless. So I will educate myself, right?
So give me an example on when you went to pitch those investors for the
Yes.
first time. You had never heard, you didn't even know what this partner meeting was.
Yes.
You're about to go sit in with 10 people, 8 people, whatever.
Yes.
How did you find out about what a partner meeting was, what I'm supposed to do when I get inside of this meeting? Like, you didn't know whether you're not supposed to come in and like show, projections about where your business is going to be 5 years from now, or whether you're supposed to talk, or whether you're supposed to make them coffee, or like.
I don't know, right?
So who did you ping?
All I did was, what the amazing thing that Digg did beyond sort of helping me learn, more about what I was good at, and also be able to spend some time in the city and have a chance to meet a lot of great people through the relationships that we were building for the business, was that I had people who I ended up becoming really good friends with on a personal level, where I could just call and be like, well, I'm really confused. Can you help me with these? And to be honest with you, Matt is one of those, like the top, like Van Horn was the reason why I came down to the valley in the first place, right? He was the one who convinced.
So you called him up before you went in there, like, this is what I'm about to do.
He's my go-to guy for pretty much everything, like,
so
because he has seen more than I have, in that he's older, he's done more,
You're saying find that go-to guy for yourself.
So he's not exactly like a veteran in that he's like 40 or 50 and he's exited 15 times, but what he has done is he's usually a couple of years ahead of me, right? So he will always have an answer because he's already figured it out. So I would just ping him, and I'm like, dude, I have no idea. But here's the thing, Van Horn's also really good at this. And you've probably noticed this. He knows in his head immediately 1 or 2 or 3 people to go to if he doesn't know it.
Absolutely.
So it's more like I go to him and he's like, well, I don't really know either, but I know these 3 guys do, so you probably want to have a coffee with them. And so I would just go and just learn. And all I did for the first 3 months of the business, if not more, was just sit and just listen. And just like Chaz, for example, was the first guy I talked to about this brand stuff, because he was
our old head of
Chaz is the head of sales at Digg. So I was like, this guy pitches brands every day. He must know.
So you sat down with him and you're like, I need to know how to pitch brands.
Yeah, I was like, dude, like, what do I do? Like, I'm going to New York and I'm going to be sitting down in front of these execs and I have no idea what I'm going to say.
So one last question then around that. When you sit down with those execs and you're in New York and you've got the little briefer from Chaz, how do you remain calm? Like, when you put your hand out there, how is it like completely steady and you're not like, oh my God, how does it not freak you out? Because a lot of people that would, it's like, oh my God, this is, intense. I could walk out of the store with a $5 million contract or nothing at all, You know
what I think about? There's only one thought, and I use this all the time.
Kittens.
And not a lot, kittens, yes. But there was one thing that, and I know this sounds very cheesy, but this is actually what goes through my head every time I walk into a meeting, where it's like, I'm in 30 Rock, I'm meeting up with like executives at like major media companies, and why would they want to meet with me, kind of thing, is I go, the last year, if I didn't do anything, or if these events did not occur, I would be nothing. Like, I would be sitting around doing absolutely nothing. And this is just the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me. And if I just go in there and just treat it as if it's like, whatever, like I'm there because I got really lucky. And I don't want to take it for granted.
That's a great, actually that's brilliant, because if you let your passion shine through, like you're super stoked, because you're excited about what you've built.
Why would I hide that? Like, I go into meetings and I always go, oh my God, thank you so much for taking the time. Like, I'm super excited to be here. There's no other, like, you could have met with 1,000 other companies, but you just took my meeting and you answered my email. So I'm not gonna take this for granted, and I'm like, thank you so much. Like, I'm grateful. And like, and what happens is people, like, when you try to, like, the reason why people get nervous though is they try to act like something that they aren't. Right? They try to be someone that they're not. And they try to be like, oh, well, I'm cool because I got this meeting and I should be smooth and everything.
Right.
But it's
like, how can I be
not
so
smooth.
Professional?
Yeah, I'll sit up and be like, I'm really nervous and I'm jumping through slides and I have no idea what I'm talking about because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, I've never done this before. The first meeting that I had for the advertising executives and the brands I was like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. All I know is that this concept is like something that I'm super passionate about, and I think you guys might see something in it. And what ended up happening is when people see that, they want to help. So a lot of the first people that I met ended up being the people who helped craft my concept.
Huh. So you approached it kind of from the not like, hey, here's what I'm selling. You know, do you want in or do you want out? You're like, hey, I'm trying to craft something. This is my first go at this, and it could completely change. Let's build something cool together. You're on at the ground floor, basically.
Because when you pretend like you know, like your entire concept is fleshed out, people get turned off.
Yeah,
because they're like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and I don't know how to tell him what I think because it sounds like he already thought of everything, but he doesn't really think that he doesn't know that he didn't think about it the right way.
Right.
But rather, I'll come in and I'll say, I know this piece. I kind of know this piece, and I know this piece. I'm gonna pretend to draw a line in between these things, and does it make any sense? Like, what do you think? And so part of this is they end up helping, and they feel like they've contributed to the vision as much as I have. And so that's always, I think, been my strategy with everything, like my entire life. It's been, I'm constantly learning. I am the biggest idiot in the room all the time. Everywhere I go, there's always gonna be someone smarter than me, always. And so part of it is, if I pretend like I'm something that I'm not, if I pretend like I know something, if I do something that just isn't true to myself, you end up turning off the people who are actually going to be able to help you legitimately.
Right.
And when those people end up being a part of your network or part of your relationship graph, or are able to be there to help you or to work with you or to learn from you, it becomes a magical thing. It becomes them being a part of the vision as much as you are. And that's the only way that anybody can become intrinsically motivated to work with you without needing anything extrinsic to motivate them.
Right.
It's because it came from within.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to meet up and have a conversation. I really want to do this again in a couple of years and like watch the old video ahead of time and then see what's changed and what's new, because I have a feeling you're going to be like, you know, you'd probably be a billionaire by that point and have hundreds of employees. But
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No, I'm really stoked for you, and I believe in what you guys are creating. I think it's a really cool concept, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Thanks, man.
Cool. See you soon.
Peace.